Reading from Exodus chapter 33, verse 9 onwards. When Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent, and the Lord would speak with Moses. And when all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise up and worship, each at his tent door. Then the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. When Moses turned again into the camp, his assistant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. Moses said to the Lord, "See, you say to me, bring up this people. But you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my sight. Now therefore, if I have found favor in your sight, please show me now your ways, that I may know you in order to find favor in your sight. Consider too that this nation is your people." And he said, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." And he said to him, "If your presence will not go with me, do not bring up from here. For how shall it be known that I have found favor in your sight, and I and your people? Is it not in your going with us, so that we are distinct, I and your people, from every other people on the face of the earth?" It is God's great desire to dwell with us and commune with us. And this was the reason behind Israel's redemption as well. In this portion, we glimpse a conversation that demonstrates this kind of relationship between God and man. After coming down from the mountain where Moses was with God, he is now with his people who rebelled against God. But he could no longer go without this time alone with God. Therefore, he set up a tent of meeting outside and far away from the camp, where anyone could go when they wanted to meet with God. Not all our life is a mountaintop experience. We have to come down to live with our people and to fulfill our mundane responsibilities and duties. Yet, it is possible to meet with God. When Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud descended on the tent. A man who is intent on meeting God will be met with God's presence. In Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 12, we read, "Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me, when you seek me with all your heart." James 4:8, "Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you." The second thing we notice in this passage is the effect this had on the people. In verse 10, "And when all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise up and worship, each at his tent door." When a leader walks with the Lord in close and humble reality, it will lead those who follow him to worship as well. We read concerning Levi in Malachi chapter 2, verse 6. "True instruction was in his mouth, and no wrong was found on his lips. He walked with me in peace and uprightness, and he turned many from iniquity." The manner in which Moses spoke to God is described as a man speaking to his friend. Abraham was called the friend of God. But how did it play out in practice? God says in Genesis chapter 18, verse 17, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do?" God shares his plans and thoughts with him. It is one thing for us to bear our thoughts to God, but to listen to God and share his thoughts is something very different. This is the only way in which we can declare his thoughts before others with truth and authority. Jesus said in John chapter 15, verse 15, "No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you." Notice the content of the conversation between God and Moses. Moses expresses his desire to know him more by knowing his ways. How God works is an indication of his character. Moses says to God, "Since you say that you know me by name and you have given me your favor, I want to know more of you in return, so that I may continue to enjoy that favor by walking with you. So please, let me learn your ways and join you." Moses does not ask God to join him in his walk, but rightly longs to join his God in his walk. This is the rightful place of a believer, and this is the right prayer for a child of God. Paul speaks in his senior years in Philippians chapter 3 verse 10 of his desire that I may know him and the power of his resurrection, and may share his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, that by any means possible I may attain the resurrection from the dead. He also reminds God that these people do not belong to him but to God. Earlier in this chapter, God had said in verse 1, "Depart, go up from here, you and the people whom you have brought up out of the land of Egypt, to the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." In chapter 32 verse 7 also we read, "Go down, for your people whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt corrupted themselves." But Moses steadfastly counters with the truth that Israel is God's people, whom he redeemed with his power, and to whom he had promised a salvation. All true servants of God carry out their ministry well because of their realization that they are serving God when they carry out his instruction to care for, shepherd, and feed his people. Their congregations do not belong to them, but to God. They are stewards of the possessions of God. In this beautiful conversation, we see God relenting from his expressed determination not to go any further with them. Just like Abraham in his intercession for Sodom and Gomorrah, we see Moses, a mere man, influencing God. How powerful is the effect of prayer when it is born out of love for God that allows us to read his true desire under his apparent anger. God says, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." And he responds by saying, "If your presence will not go with me, do not bring us up from here." There is no difference between the wilderness, teeming with dangers, and the promised land flowing with milk and honey, if God is not with them. This fundamental recognition of the absolute need for God, the source of all that is good, is the best safeguard against idolatry, for it leads to inevitable dependence upon God. The presence of God comes with a cost to the disobedient and unbelieving. Even though God relented and agreed to go with Israel in response to Moses' prayer, he eventually did destroy many because of their sins. In Numbers chapter 14 verse 36, we see the 10 spies who brought back a negative report on the land died in a plague. In Numbers 16 verse 31 to 33, we read about those involved in Korah's rebellion died and the earth swallowed them alive. Later, when the people grumbled again, God sent fiery serpents among them so that many died. We read that in Numbers 21, 5 to 6. Still later, when Israel joined themselves to Moab in idolatry and immorality, God killed 24,000 of them. Numbers 25, 1 to 9. Eventually, the entire generation that came out of Egypt died in the wilderness because of their unbelief. Numbers 14, 22 to 23. Thus, there is peril in God's presence to the hypocrite and ungodly, but there is utmost strength and security loyal kindness and forgiveness to the humble believer. To those who love his will, God's presence is the safest place. Psalmist says in Psalms 139 verse 7, where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? In verse 11, if I say, surely the darkness shall cover me and the light about me be night. Even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. David says in Psalms 23 verse 4, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. What makes a true Christian different from others? Moses says, is it not in your going with us so that we are distinct, I and your people, from every other people on the face of the earth? It is not in our name or church or reputation or anything else. It is his presence. Potiphar saw this in Joseph. Genesis 39:3. His master saw that the Lord was with him. Later, the jailer recognized the same thing in verse 23. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. Much later, Pharaoh found the same distinction. Genesis 41:38. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? Let us recognize that our hearts are a tent of meeting where we may constantly resort to him, to walk with him all the day, to hear and obey and declare the counsel of our great God who is our Redeemer. Let our lives be known for nothing else but his presence with us, for that is our glory. God bless.